Very much indeed for joining. I'm delighted to be here this evening. Well, I'm not really, because I'm fed up with Zoom, as I'm sure you all are, but as we can't be there in person, we can make do with this. This is going to be a speedy visit through all of the tours we're doing this year. Our brochure is out. If you haven't had a copy or you want a copy or another one, just get in touch with me or travel department and we'll get one out to you. Any questions I'll be happy to answer at the end. And remember, I'm always at the end of a phone if you need to speak to me. You know, of course, the tours are guided by either Ian and I, escorted morning, noon and night. We do like to sleep by ourselves at night without any questions, but otherwise we're on duty. Morning, noon and night. We do like to sleep by ourselves at night. We're on duty all day, every day, and the groups are small and friendly and lovely. I'm starting with the sights of Japan because it should have been on the 30th of March, but of course, due to COVID and the fact we would have had to quarantine, it's now on November. And there's an hour-long introduction to it on the Travel Department YouTube channel, which I did last year. But here, just a glimpse of some of the gardens. We're going in November when the weather is wonderful and the autumn colour is in full blaze. It's fantastic. Ginkgo trees here just making carpets of yellow leaves. We visit all the well-known sites, the Golden Pavilion. Japan is a city and a country of contrasts. This is a typical Kyoto street. The river going through, old houses, beautiful. This is Tokyo with one of the railway stations. This is Harajuku, which they call the Paris of Tokyo. And then you've got these skyscrapers. So you're constantly between the two extremes. They managed to move into first world and yet retain a fantastic sense of culture and old world charm. Gardens are varied and beautiful. This is the garden I'm having when I'm 90, when I just go out and rake with my rollator. Bonsai gardens, of course, we see wonderful shrine gardens with beautiful pines, which are pruned about 3 times a year. Fantastic moss gardens. Lovely what they call strolling gardens where you walk through. This is Kyoto here, one of the main gardens in Kyoto that we visit at the Silver Pavilion. And of course, parks, which are right in the middle of Tokyo, and gardens, and you just have moments of peace in the middle of the city. Up in the mountains where we go to view Mount Fuji, of course, there's the great open air museum with wonderful works of art. And of course, all the time we're traveling through this colorful countryside. Stopping for a cup of tea. The tea ceremony normally takes 8 hours, but we do the taster version of about half an hour. And of course, we all live in hope of seeing the wonderful Mount Fuji, which generally we're lucky enough to do so. So as I said, you can get more information on that on the YouTube channel. Chelsea Flower Show, we only have 7 places left on this. It's a short trip, just 2 nights based in Twickenham. We go to Kew Gardens. I was lucky enough to work in Kew in the previous life. Well, just when I was young, which I call my previous life. We have a nice guided tour of Kew Gardens, a lovely time of year in May when everything is fresh and wonderful. This is the lake overlooked by the Palm House. And we're at Chelsea in the morning. Chelsea opens at 8 a.m. and we're usually the first group in at 5 minutes past 8. Of course, you know, it's the famous display of gardens. It always looks very crowded on television because everyone is flocking to see the prime attraction, which is, of course, Monty Don. But if you keep away from Monty Don, it's spacious and lovely. You can enjoy the great pavilion. Fantastic, even in May, wonderful selection of roses. Chelsea really is the ultimate garden show. You just see plants in their prime, see new ones, old ones presented, and with great ideas for your own garden. And we finish on the 3rd day, which is relaxed and away from the city. at the RHS Garden in Wisley, which has had a huge makeover during COVID. It's interesting, a lot of gardens had suffered. I went to a lecture last night on West Dean, and they had no gardens in, and when they came back, the grass had turned into hay. But Wisley has kept going and made a big change. We have 4 Irish tours this year, the first one being to Donegal. And again, a limited places left on this tour. This is led by Ian, who loves Donegal and has done this tour before. And the weather is usually good. We've been very lucky always. We go to the fantastic Oakfield Park Garden, a wonderful, extensive, expansive garden, beautiful walks. And of course, we take the easy route and travel around on the train to see most of it. But there's a more intimate garden and a more sort of more commonly planted up garden. And we have a look at that, which is, and then of course, another wonderful garden is Glenveigh Castle. I've been talking to them recently. They're not sure if they're going to be able to open the castle this year to visitors because of regulations, but they hope it will. But the garden itself has the terrific Sean O'Guihon as its head gardener, and he takes the group round the garden. It's a fantastic garden, you know, in the middle of nowhere. Just the whole instinct to create it and the inspiration was wonderful. And of course, it's been fantastically maintained. We have to, of course, visit a nursery when we're on a garden tour. And I suppose Clúin na Tór is one of the best known nurseries for wonderful garden with it and some of the most unusual plants. And there's the great thing about going by coach either to England or within Ireland is that you just shove your plants in the coach and on they come home. We visit several private gardens. This is the wonderful Sea View Garden, which is terrific, and just lovely ideas for combinations in your own garden. Again, the end of May, so a nice time to visit. And the tour there is based in Donegal town. And as I said, if you're interested in going on that, all of the tours in Ireland start by coach from Dublin this year. So, and if you need to know starting times or anything like that, just give me a shout. I'm not showing anything for the Gardens of Kent and Sussex, which is based in Brighton and includes trips to Sissinghurst and Great Dixter, because it was booked out. We've now had one cancellation. Sadly, somebody has to go for surgery. So we have one single place on that. Do ring travel department if you're interested. Ian takes the gardens, the tour to the Gardens of the Cotswolds. And it's called Shakespeare's Gardens, but of course, just one day for Shakespeare's Garden. But the tour is based in the beautiful Stratford-on-Avon. Lovely tour in the heart of the prettiest of English countryside. You'll have an opportunity, should you wish to go to a play in the Globe Theatre. We usually arrange that and get in touch with you individually so that you have your tickets before you go. And visit, everybody of course knows Anne Hathaway's cottage and garden, but they've redone all of the gardens and have great things going on around. This is Hall Place, another lovely vegetable garden here belonging to Mary Arden, and this is her farm with all the original features and actresses helping you along to understand the whole Shakespearean way of life. They've set up a new garden called Shakespeare's New Place in Stratford-on-Avon, and you will be visiting there as well. And if you haven't read it and you are going on this tour, I don't always recommend books, but do try Hamnet from Maggiore. It's a lazy way into Shakespeare and a wonderful way, and it will inspire you to read all the plays, I think. Anyway, on that tour as well, we visit the fantastic Hidcote Garden, the Lawrence Johnson Garden, one of the most famous rooms garden, I suppose, the originator of the concept of creating gardens in different rooms with different themes. This is the red border and red garden here. Kiffsgate, which is literally 5 minutes down the road from Hidcote. Hidcote, made famous by the Kirsgate Rose, but run by three gardeners, three generation of women gardeners, and Anne Chambers, the youngest one, is still going strong there. It's a fantastic, very private garden, really beautiful, wonderful terraces, wonderful borders, and just a great place to see. So those two gardens side by side are visited. As well as that, we visit the terrific Coton Manor and Cottersbrook Hall as well. So a great variety of gardens, as well as a good introduction to the gardens of Shakespeare there. We moved then, Gardens of Tipperary, another, excuse me, Irish tour. And I must say, thanks to the people who are going on this, they doggedly booked in 2019, 2020, and then 22. So that was booked instantly. Every year we try to take a garden tour by ferry for people who just cannot face the airport. Though I must say airports have got a little easier, but I'm sure, excuse me, I'm sure during the summers numbers might build up again, but at the moment it's quite pleasant travelling. The great thing about this is directly from Dublin on Irish ferries, and we cross to Holyhead, and one of the gardens we visit is Catherine Swift's superb garden at the Dower House, where she traces the history of garden through different areas in the garden. And she gives us a tour herself of this lovely garden that she's managed for the National Trust and created over the last 30 years. And we visit the magnificent Powys Castle, just absolutely wonderful. I mean, when you look at it, I was dubious always about going here, because to me it just seemed a castle with terraces. But within these terraces are the most wonderful herbaceous and shrub borders with new and exciting plants and lovely combinations. You know, you think when you go to these gardens, what do they have to do with my little plot? But in actual fact, they're great for ideas. We also visit Hodnett Hall, quite a historical garden, but again with beautiful pockets of shrubs and herbaceous. And one of my favourite gardens in the whole of England. It's a privately owned small garden, exquisite, Woolerton Old Hall, which has structures that you dive for, and then magnificent planting interspersed with terrific topiary and structure. Beautifully done and wonderfully kept, just a joy, and of course a riot of colour in the different areas. A great garden, I think, really wonderful, just very unusual, all the time something new and different in it. And we visit the famous John Massey's garden, and of course his nursery as well. I'm sure you're familiar with him. He's an expert on heucheras and hellebores, and it's an exciting time to see. We're lucky to be going at the time when David Austin roses are in full flower, and we'll be paying a visit to the nursery there as well. And finally, on the way back through Wales, before we get back on the ferry, this is a 5-day trip. We go to Plascadnet, which is a hidden garden in Wales, not too far from the ferry, for our final wander and injection of gardens before we head home on the ferry. We stay, of course, for this trip near Shrewsbury, and you'll have an opportunity to spend a morning in the lovely town there, and lovely hotel based in the countryside. Shrewsbury itself is a historic town, and even if you don't like shopping, it's fantastic to go to the cathedral there. Excuse me, Ian does the next trip, the gardens of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. It's sort of an unknown part of England, but absolutely lovely gardens. The town, of course, city of Winchester is famous for the cathedral, and of course is famous for one of its most famous writers. Jane Austen is buried there, and they didn't even put on her gravestone that she was a writer, probably because she was a woman. but that's another question. But worthwhile seeing the cathedral there, absolutely beautiful. And of course, when we're staying in somewhere like this, we try and leave a few hours free so that people can have a wander and get a feel of the place and they know where they've been. Short ferry crossing over to the Isle of Wight, which of course was made famous by Queen Victoria, enjoyed going there. And two of her gardens, this is Waterford Abbey, which she created, and of course then the humbler garden as well to visit there. We spend a day, you spend a day, not we, I won't be going, Ian will be going on that, in one of the most exciting gardens, Exbury. Just the pinnacle of perfection in gardening, but a very, very extensive garden, absolutely enormous. And for this, of course, you get a ride on a train all the way around the garden. So, and hop off where you want to see or where you don't want to see. So you manage to cover the whole place. One of the most famous shrub people and plants people in England is Hillier's, and Hillier's original garden is open to the public. They have done wonders. I mean, originally it was just used as a place for their plant propagation unit and to grow stock basically, but it's fantastic gardens now, and this is one of the places on the final day that Ian will take you to visit, with their new millennial borders and just wonderful layout and plants and shrubs again. Finally, a very small garden with topiary, little court, a gem of a garden. One of the tours that I've been doing for years, and this one, again, there's very few places. I think there's only about 6 places left on this tour. This is the Best Chateaux garden. Best Chateaux, of course, was known for her fantastic books. I mean, we seem to have an excess of gardening books, and we're going to thin them out, I think, now. But these are 2 that I'd never ever part with. Really fantastic books. She was the person who decided the right plant, the right place was the way to successful gardening. So we have a lovely visit, a good introduction to her garden, and then a wander around the garden, both the damp garden and the dry garden. And just fantastic. She foresaw climate change way before anybody was worried about it. Of course, it's a very dry part of the country, but this gravel garden is so beautiful and never gets watered. It's just a fantastic example of really good gardening. We also visit a traditional garden here. This is Hoverton Hall with its wonderful herbaceous borders, lovely veg garden, fruit garden, and of course, a chocolate box house that's frequently pictured on jigsaw puzzles, if it looks familiar to you. And they're fantastic spider gate. So don't go near it if you're a bit terrified of spiders. It's quite realistic. As a contrast, we visit the wonderful original home of Anne Boleyn, Blickling Hall. Again, fantastic, interesting house. We try and always add in some houses as well as gardens, and you have the opportunity when you're there. I'd spend most of your time in the garden or most of your time in the house, whichever you like. But of course, like all of the gardens, it's been greatly enhanced over the last few years. New borders, new layouts. The original lawns are now filled with herbaceous rather than just left these vast expanses of grass. So a fascinating trip there. And we also go a garden that isn't as well known as it should be. This was started about 32 years ago by a couple who gradually created one of the most exciting contemporary gardens, I think. And this is East Rushton Old Vicarage, a superb, interesting garden with so many different areas, topiary, herbaceous, woodland, Mediterranean, exotic. It's just a feast for the eyes. So it's we spend an entire afternoon there, and it's very exciting. And of course, in a tiny behind a little house in Norge, there's a lovely teddy bears garden, which is a sweet little garden that we visit. It opens for charity, and you go through the teddy bear shop to get to it. Just to finish off, we also visit Blooms of Bressingham. Alas, they no longer have their nursery, but the garden, the original garden, is there with its wonderful island beds of herbaceous perennials. A fantastic garden, and we're visiting in early July, a great time of year to go. We're based in Norge at the Maid's Head Hotel. We always try and stay in some of the older hotels, the character hotels, and this is right beside Norge Cathedral, and also around some of the sweetest little back roads and that have been there for centuries. So Norge is an exciting place to visit, as well as seeing gardens. Gardens of Waterford, again, Ian is taking that. And we start with Lismore Castle, with its lovely gardens, lovely borders. And we also visit the fantastic, excuse me, Mancongry Gardens, of course. We can't go anywhere without visiting that. It's as wonderful as ever. And from there, we see it, we're going at the time of year when it's looking good. From there, we take our coach goes ahead of us, and we take the small train into Waterford City, where we are privileged to be allowed into a private garden that isn't generally open to the public. A really exquisite garden that is only opened occasionally. I think I had to blackmail the owner, but anyway, we're going there. And then, of course, I'm sure many of you have been or heard about the great Japanese Lafcadio Japanese garden in Tremor, which goes from strength to strength. So we'll be seeing that as well and having a guided tour. It's really done wonders in the last few years, and one of the most popular places, as well as a traditional Turin house. We're going to see the house itself and have lunch there, and then visit the garden, which of course is one of the historical gardens in Ireland, a really lovely garden, as well as visiting a small private town garden, Margaret Power's garden in Waterford. We finish our tour with a visit to Fairhaven House near Waterford, an artist's garden where the old ruins were left and the garden developed around it. And just in case you haven't just bought any plants, we call into Beechdale Garden Centre for our lunch and plant picking on the way home. And we're based in Waterford. We're staying right on the quays, a lovely city that's been greatly enhanced over the last few years. I get the privilege of taking our Gardens of Louth and Meath tour. And we've done this tour once before, and it's just such, I think, although we've always traveled to England, you forget how lovely Ireland is. I know many of you have been traveling around it the last few years because we haven't been able to go abroad, but it really is, we're so privileged to live in Ireland, really. We're staying in the Carrickdale Hotel, with its nice garden they developed for weddings. Hopefully no one will be getting married when we're there. But one of the gardens we're going to, I'm sure lots of you read the Irish Garden magazine or on Facebook, and one of the terrific new young gardeners is Rosie May. And she calls herself the Insomniac Gardener because she is, and she writes wonderful pieces at night time. And we get to see pictures of her garden and her blog every day on Facebook. But we'll visit her garden in Slane, and that'll be followed by a short visit to the Francis Ledwidge Cottage Museum and Garden, the wonderful poet, of course. We're going to see Kilgar Gardens, terrific gardens of Paul Le Byrne. This photograph is kindly taken by Richard Murphy, whose photography is wonderful of gardens. And we have a guided tour of the Battle of the Boyne Centre, which is fascinating. Having been in that area, you have to know what's going on. And the gardens, of course, at the back are beautiful behind the cafe. A lovely house where you can stay, should you wish, is Colin House in Meath. Beautiful Georgian house. And we have a tour not only of the house, but also of the garden, which has informal and very formal parts, wonderfully maintained. We go to Barmeath Castle, again for a tour, and then for a walk around the extensive gardens there, which are really lovely. And then also we take to Bewley House for another little look around the garden there. One of our visits there, it's the first time visiting this year with the tour, Bettystown cottages. These are traditional thatch cottage, luxury thatch cottages that are rented out, but their gardens have been developed right on the sea, but amazing what they can grow in the gales of the coming in from the sea. And finally, we have a nice talk and walk around Rathoe Garden Centre, a great garden centre, and hidden behind it, of course, is the wonderful garden. So that finishes our tour to Louth and Meath. We returned to France this year. We go really on 3 tours there, either Monet or else to Normandy, but this year it's to the wonderful Loire Valley. French gardens can be quite formal, but on the other hand, there are so many hidden niches in them with a dash of informality as well. We stay in the traditional hotel in the city of Tours, in a magnificent hotel, which has been there for years, refurbished, of course, so it's full of comfort, but right in the center of the city. And we visited a series, you visit, I don't speak any French, so you'll have to excuse my pronunciation even of the chateaux. This is Chenonceau Chateau with its fantastic formal gardens, and we do chateaux and gardens. You do chateaux and gardens on this tour for most of them. This is Amboise with its lovely chateaux and villas, and in the afternoon, it's the International Flower Festival on Garden and Flower Festival, which runs for a couple of months in the summer. And it's a bit like the Chelsea of France. So that's included in this tour as well. This is Valmer, the Chateau Valmer, and you meet the owner of this chateau, and there's wine tasting. We used to have this in the morning, but realized that once people had done their wine tasting, most of them just wanted to snooze afterwards. So this is done late in the afternoon, a look around the garden and some tasting some wine. Chateau de Riveau, picturesque, lovely, wonderful mixture of veg and fruit. And finally, this is the garden, one of a lovely garden. I have been on this tour once with Ian, but this is obviously his because he speaks French. This is the garden of Pierre de Ronsard. Pierre de Ronsard is to France as, I suppose, Yeats is to Ireland. A fantastic poet who was inspired, of course, by a young woman. And this rose is Pierre de Ronsard. Sometimes in England it's called the Eden rose. This was taken actually in our previous garden, and we brought the rose with us. But a fantastic rose. So if you see it, it's a little bit of France. And of course, the most famous garden of all in the Loire Valley. This is Valandry, which you will visit also. Late in the year, everybody wants to see Chatsworth, I suppose. It's in Derbyshire, an absolutely magnificent countryside. It's just so lovely. Wonderful. Wherever you go on a journey to the garden, you're going across beautiful landscape, based in the lovely spa town of Buxton. And visiting one of the first gardens visited en route from the airport to Buxton is Lime Hall. Lime Hall is a wonderful house and garden made famous by Colin Firth jumping into the lake in Pride and Prejudice. And they put in this appalling plastic icon afterwards, which I think should be shot, but that's beside the point. Chatsworth, one of, if not the most beautiful, beautiful house. We have a guided tour of Chatsworth, not of all 650 rooms, but certainly enough to give a great taste. But even if you're not a lover of visiting houses, there's something for everyone. It's absolutely exquisite. This is the famous Cascade waterfall, of course, and they have more intimate places with their veg garden. Really lovely. The Great Hall, of course, is well known, as is one of the most famous pieces of marble there, the Veiled Lady. I love this place. This is where the most recent Jane Eyre was set. And when you look down from the battlements, you can almost imagine the carriages of old crossing the bridge. They've obviously had to bring in new entrances since, but a beautiful old hall, a beautiful old building, and well worth a visit. We also visit Biddulph Grange. Biddulph Grange is divided into different gardens, some formal, some casual, Chinese, Egyptian. This is one of the most magnificent things. This is their dahlia border. So we're there for the dahlias. And as you can see, that one man probably spends his entire summer cutting the hedges. So don't complain about your own hedges. Imagine if you lived at Biddulph Hall. An exquisite Chinese garden. I mean, as you know, most of the plants we have come from Asia. And this is a great example of a really good Chinese garden here. And of course, we're going when the autumn colour is starting. A wonderful framed house, Little Martin Hall, just fantastic for a tour of a sort of 16th century wooden house that seems as if it's going to collapse any day, with this little formal and herbal gardens around. And finally, you can visit in Buxton the beautiful pavilions and the Opera House, of course. So our one of the tours that we do regularly, and generally by this time of year, we have the dates. But of course, because the last couple of years have been so uncertain, we're waiting on them. But once we get them, we will send out the list, first of all, to those of you who have expressed interest in Highgrove. I keep a mailing list, so we can only take 25 people, when mostly we only take 25 people, but we really are confined to 25 people on this tour. And you get the list, and it mostly books from that. So if you are keen on or would like to go to Highgrove, and I'm really sorry I can't give you any inkling as to when we're going, whether it'll be May to August, but we hope that they will release. It all depends on what Prince Charles is doing and about the Queen and everything like that. But we have to wait till his schedule is decided. Obviously, we can't say hurry up there and make up your mind, because we have to go places. So we just have to be patient and see when he will welcome us to Highgrove. It's a great garden. I mean, if you're the future King of England and have access to mostly anything you want, you could create a terrific garden. They have a brilliant head gardener there, and she has worked alongside Prince Charles, and it's all organic. I mean, they have fought bindweed in the borders for years. I mean, I think I would have lapsed and given it a spray, but they've overcome it, and they grow, everything is grown beautifully. And of course, the structures are a delight, but the meadow itself is just wonderful. I mean, I think it'd be lovely to have this and say to someone, oh, I'm thinking of creating a meadow. And immediately the next day, Prince Charles got a present of 10,000 fritillarias from Sting. So, and then for his 60th, he got 63 ferns from New Zealand. So when you give someone a plant for their birthday, they're very appreciative. And we also visit the wonderful Harold Peto garden, Iford Manor, a different garden, a private garden run by an extremely nice family, a really lovely Italianate garden. And we have a terrific guided tour to Derry Hills Garden. She's a great plants woman. She's been to Ireland lecturing, and she sells the most wonderful plants and seeds. But Highgrove itself is beautiful. The Delphin, this is the house, and we walk very close to it. And I have to say to people, please don't peer in the windows. Derry, these slides are a little out of order. Sorry, this is Derry Watkins, who's a powerful person, but fascinating, and gives us the tour. Iford Manor, wonderful garden set in the beautiful countryside, and with the terrific pillars, and you walk down the garden, but it again borders that have been refurbished. And we're based for this tour in the fantastic city of Bath, and we have a guided tour of Bath on the coach, so you get to see the whole place, and then you can return in your free time to look at anything particular that you'd like to look at, whether it's the Roman baths or the assembly rooms or whatever. I have been going to Lake Maggiore for a long time. I've been doing these garden tours now. This is my 29th year doing garden tours. I've been delighted to be with the travel department for the last 10 years, which has made my life very, very easy. It's a great company to work for, but Lake Maggiore is heaven. Absolutely beautiful. The same people come back again and again on tour with me. And we go late in the year because we can't stand the heat, and travel mostly by boat wherever we're going. It's just short trips. Once you get to Straysa, we're based in Straysa, it's short trips across the lakes to the various places. The Borromeen Islands, of course, are the main attraction, with their fantastic castles and their terrace gardens and their informal gardens. This is Villa Taranto, another wonderful garden we visited while we were there. They call it the Botanical Garden of Lake Maggiore, and it definitely is fascinating from all aspects, with a dahlia maze. They bed out these dahlias every year, and in the spring there's a tulip maze, but in the autumn, and if you hate dahlias, by the time you walk through that maze, you'll find one you've loved. Beautifully kept fountains and lawns, and just wonderful views the whole time over the lake.
I know, I'm listening to her. Thanks, John. I'm listening to her on the phone.
This is Villa Pallavicino, again, a lovely floriferous garden. And on the days that are free days, I usually go on a train, the Centre Valley train to Switzerland, which travels through the mountains, and then we come back by steamer up along the lake. So it's a heaven of a holiday, and really beautiful places. This is the center of Straysa, just a little village where you can wander in and sit down and have your morning coffee. We have great groups. I love this. I saw this. I'm not a great person for these things that come up, but I saw this and I thought it was lovely. And you think about who you travel with. As I said, we never take more than 25 people. And I am never ceased to be amazed at how interesting people are and how well they get on with each other and how considerate they are of each other on the trips. And even the people that like to complain all the time become fascinating. So I hope you'll think about joining us on one of these tours. Please ring me if you need to know